where that this passion for empowerment came is, let's say like around the age of like 26. I was 26 at the time when like life just, I felt like my whole life I was trying to attach to things that would help me not feel like I was going to get dropped. And I was like totally dropped, like totally disempowered. I realized like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know why I'm doing anything that I'm doing right now. Like, what the heck, God? And I grew up with a lot of different belief systems. A lot of different religions were impacting me from early on in my life. And so I was like, God, like I thought we were on the same page here, but like I feel totally dropped. All I've been trying to do is be a good person, and like I feel like none of, like, what the heck, right?
Boom. All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads, where being mediocre is a choice and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. I'm your host, Queon. I go by Q, of course. And on this episode, I am joined by a very, very special guest. I was recording an episode last night, and I was talking to a gentleman who was from Australia, and now I'm talking to an individual who is truthfully a traveler of the world, if you will, because she is coming all the way from Dubai, and this for me is just an amazing opportunity and experience because being able to talk to people from all over the world is something that I never imagined I would be able to do on this platform, right? Being in the military, I have traveled to many places. I've been to the Middle East, I've been to Europe. So like I've spoken to people in that sense, but not in the sense of being on the podcast. So I'm just very grateful. So with all of that, but before we get into it, let me introduce you to my guest. Her name is Harsha. Did I say it right?
Yes, you got it.
Harsha. Okay, perfect. We're gonna have a really good conversation. I was talking to her before, and I'm really excited for this conversation. I will have an actual episode with her husband coming up here pretty soon, as well as them together. So it's going to be awesome. Like, this is just the beginning of this conversation that me and her are having. So when you do end up seeing this, be prepared to know that more you'll be seeing more of her to come on the podcast and whatever the case might be. So before we get into it, Harsha, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Queon, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Firstly, just I'm very grateful to be here, to have this opportunity to like get to know you and then like unravel this journey together of myself, my relationship with my husband, and then us together in parenting and life in general. I am a mom. I'm a breathwork facilitator. I'm also an empowerment guide. I truthfully just really am on this journey of getting to know myself and really wanting to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be. I've always known from the time I knew anything that I was meant to help people. And like I mentioned to you briefly before this, I thought the way to do that was by becoming a doctor. And as I grew up and I started that path, I realized it's not the only way, but the calling to be of service has always been like my true nature. And so now with the work I do, I feel like I'm bringing all aspects of me and my unique way of helping people to here, to like wherever it needs to go, kind of thing.
Yeah, to the world.
So yeah, that's who I am. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So kind of getting right into it. So for myself, I have an idea of what, or I have an idea in my head, the audience, and for better understanding, can you kind of explain in deeper and greater detail, like what is someone like yourself? What do you mean? You say you do breath work, or empowerment? Like what are those things, or what would that look like?
I love that question. So breathwork is a tool of empowerment. Like the foundation of my work, I would say, is empowerment, which is one, like me being empowered is me totally believing in myself. Right? Like I believe who I am, what I know. And so when I offer this work to people, it's me holding the space for those who come in to work with me to really get to believe in themselves at like the most deepest, most profound level. And that means that from the moment that you came into this world, you already had everything you needed inside of you. And the learning process was simply about, like the mechanics of being human, like how to communicate, how to walk, how to talk. But there's this like inner knowing, like to this connection to the source of whatever your belief system may be. I've learned it's kind of like all one big thing, but that's always there. And so empowerment and breathwork is a tool for it, which by breathing, you get to really bring that life force energy into your own body to start to like awaken and light up the places where all of that knowing is basically like living inside of you. And so in the work that I do, I guide my clients through getting in touch with themselves, activating their breath in certain ways that help them open up, either releasing things that have been in the way of them already knowing that, like, oh yeah, I already, right, I know this. Like, there's no more doubt. There's no more this. There's no more whatever used to be in the way of me just being able to be like, yeah, like, I know who I am. I know what I'm here for. And even in the mistakes I make, I know that's like the perfect thing that needed to happen for me to then learn and grow from. And that life then becomes this like momentous, like forward motion and in every direction versus like that what I used to feel and what I find a lot of people feel is like that constant roadblock of like there's an obstacle in my way that I can't get past. And what I found is like we become our own obstacle, right? Like we self-doubt, we judge ourselves, we don't make the move or we avoid and all that kind of stuff. So all this to say empowerment is me knowing that we all already have everything we need inside of us and in allowing that space to be held for that to come online. That's the work that I do. And breathwork is such a potent tool to like help facilitate that.
Wow, that's amazing because I could tell the passion that you have for what it is that you do, especially and how much it's helped you in your life. Because I think it's important. A lot of people will and it's kind of a tangent maybe, but a lot of people lack passion behind what it is, whatever it is they're doing, and so it's just kind of like I'm just doing it just for doing it at this point. But to see someone who's clearly very passionate about what they do and how it's impacted their life because you utilize it yourself, you don't feel like you're being fed a bunch of BS. It's genuine. There's genuine care. There's genuine, what is the word? Just realness behind what it is you're saying and what it is you're doing, rather than just like I'm here to sell you a product. And if you take it, you take it. If you don't, you don't. Right? You know what I mean? So like you could tell the passion behind it. So I really do appreciate. So for you, when did this journey start, right? Or have you always been in this journey where you're just like, this is where I'm at, right? Because you didn't mention you were at one point you were, thinking about being a doctor or going down that route of being a doctor. So did it change at that
Right.
moment or was it before?
Yeah. Also, I love questions like this. I love conversations like this that get me like back in touch with this part of myself. So I would say like right around the end of high school, I started to kind of like feel not so focused and driven anymore towards my goal of being a doctor.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what it was about. Like, couldn't put my finger on it. It just was like, but I also didn't have the courage or the resource within myself to be able to say to anyone, especially my parents, that like this is what I want to do. And soon after that was actually nearing the end of my university degree when I was going through pre-med. I met my now husband, Aaron, and this is when it like started to really land for me. One, it was it was actually a very toxic relationship to start off with. Like there was a definite bond that we both felt right off the bat. But at the same time, there was so much within it that wasn't working that I kept questioning, like, what is going on here? But while that was happening, I also started to like, there was different aspects of me that were starting to like emerge through the relationship with him. One was I felt this sense of security and safety in a person that wasn't my parents. So I had this like resource to go a different route and not feel like I was just going to be dropped or like not supported or just like on my own completely. But also, I started to see a different way, like a whole nother reality, a way of thinking. Because the upbringing that he came from, he had a sense of empowerment in himself at a level that wasn't available for me before that. And it actually came to a point where I like to say it's like contrast where everything just fell apart in my life. Like the relationship too, which I had started to put everything into the relationship from a not healthy place, just fell apart. I was like, I don't even know like where I'm going, what's going on. So where that this passion for empowerment came is, let's say like around the age of like 26. I was 26 at the time when like life just, I felt like my whole life I was trying to attach to things that would help me not feel like I was going to get dropped. And I was like totally dropped, like totally disempowered. I realized like I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm here for. I don't know why I'm doing anything that I'm doing right now. Like what the heck, God. And I grew up with a lot of different belief systems. A lot of different religions were impacting me from early on in my life. And so I was like, God, like I thought we were on the same page here, but like I feel totally dropped. All I've been trying to do is be a good person, and like I feel like none of like what the heck, right? And so divine intervention, because I really, I mean, this is what I mean, right? Like when we really open up to this space, there is a knowing inside of us that we may not have been conditioned to believe. In everything falling apart, that part of me opened up to then allow something bigger and something deeper to like start to speak to me. And like baby steps, I started to listen to that. I call it my intuition now, that I just started to follow. And it meant like just doing everything in a way opposite from how I was used to doing before. And that was when it started for me. So it all started from total breakdown, like feeling like my parents were like, my daughter's lost. I don't know where she's going. Felt like I was going to be disowned by them. They still love me very much. This is all stories in my head. But there's just this conditioning of like they're no longer proud of me. I've failed them. And then in my relationship, like we were engaged at the time, I'd gotten cheated on, and I found out about it. It happened not just that time, and so like everything just was like broken. And in the like knowing that no one actually in this world is here to save me, like no one, even the people who I thought were here to protect and love and like do this for me are actually not the ones meant to do that. That's when I started to go, okay, I'm meant to do this for myself. Like I'm meant to pick up these pieces of myself one by one, look at them, understand them, and then build who I really am from that place, connecting to still that higher power that I'd always known existed, but it was based on what other people were telling me. And this was the first time in my life I was doing it from my own guidance, like one intuitive hit at a time. And so now, like 10 years later, here we are.
That's amazing. You said something that I wanted to made me think of a question.
Yeah.
So when you say empowerment, I think of the word that comes to mind for me is confidence. And
Mm.
you mentioned that your husband, when you first met him, you said his parents or his upbringing was he felt he had the feeling of empowerment. It was clear to you in that moment, right? So for me, again, relating it to confidence, this is my question. So, do you think that parental confidence, right? Like, so our parents, they give us confidence as we grow up, right? And or at least they're supposed to in a way, right? Help us build our confidence, not give us, but
Yeah.
help us build our confidence. For sons, when you're
Yeah.
raising a son, for a father to a son, it seems like, hey, the confidence that you get is through accomplishing certain things because you see your dad accomplishing those things with whether it's with his hands, his mind, or whatever the case might be. Now, accomplishment for a daughter, though, I don't know what that looks like. I have two daughters myself, and so they're 7 and 2, or 6 and 2. So like I'm still learning and trying to understand and figure out what that means, especially when they do become 20 years, 50, or let's just say 18 to 20 years old, right? Like, and they're out on their own, or are they going to have the confidence? Did I instill enough confidence in them? So my question for you is, what does that look like for you as a mom who has a son, right? What is that parental confidence and building that confidence look up from your perspective? And then what is it that you think it looks like from the perspective of a father?
Okay, cool. I would say there is a lot of like what you mentioned in terms of like witnessing how your parents are moving through things in life. And then that role modeling naturally like permeates into their being. They internalize it. I'm noticing it in my son even more now. Like he's modeling everything. And we even seem to think our kids are very intelligent. They're able to model so much from us, but they may not have the concept of it yet. It's kind of just a behavior thing, which then we can, through conversation, help them kind of conceptualize where the behaviors are coming from and connect it to something deeper. But the answer, like more than that, what I would say is like the word allowing is coming to me. It's like this allowing of them making the step, like taking the step that they feel is the step they need to take, especially when they are ready to do it, when they're like, no, mom, I got it. Like, I can do it myself, right? They go, okay,
Mm.
but we're like, like we're the ones that kind of have that like safety guard of, I don't know, can you? And so
Yeah.
in a way, it's that trust, like that's where our confidence gets challenged. Like, do I have confidence and the empowerment essentially that even if my child falls right now, like that's the thing they need. Because then the getting up is where we build the bridge to a new growth edge that wouldn't have been possible before. And if they don't fall, then what we get to do is we get to watch them and celebrate them and taking that step and like doing it. And then we're like, yes, you did it. Like, and then inside of them, there's like a thank you for allowing me to do that. And then they build that
Mm.
confidence over time. And it may not always be, right? Like with my son, for example, right now, there's certain things he's still like, no, like help me do it, or like, I need help with it. And in that, that's where I circle back to the modeling, the role modeling of how we show them how it's done is how they'll internalize that, not from a place of you're doing it wrong or anything, but like almost coming down next to them at their level and saying, like, as if you're thinking like them, like, okay, like, this is what I see. This is what needs to be done next. Like, and then even offering them like a little bit of that confidence boost of like, what do you think? Like, what's your idea? And then see what they come up with and allow it's like being on the same team as them. And
Mm.
I think this goes for both boys and girls, but maybe the slight difference, which actually I'd love to hear from you as the father of daughters, is, and I'm a mother of a son, is with boys, there may be a little bit more of an intrinsic, like the doing aspect. Like when they do things, they want that confidence boost of like, I did that, I accomplished it. But for girls, and this is where I'd love to hear your take on it, it's kind of a like, look at me. Like, it's like who I'm being right now is so great. Like, is like, and that's what they're looking for the celebration on. But there's nuance, and I'm sure it goes both ways for boys and girls. So I'm curious, like, how do you feel as a dad to girls?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I think it's a great question because and you said it. You hit the nail on the head when you just said it right there. For my daughters, what I see, what I notice is it's especially my oldest, and because she's more aware of kind of her surroundings, whatever the case might be. But as for her, it's like, hey, Dad, look at me. Am I being the person that you're accepting, or you can accept? Is this me that is this or this attitude or this thing I'm doing or whatever it is? Are you going to accept me, or are you going to push back and say, don't do that. Hey, stop acting that way. You shouldn't be doing that. Whatever the case may be. Like, but it's just wanting to be accepted. And all kids, daughters or our sons want to be accepted. But I do think for daughters, it's more about being seen by the people that they love the most. And for a lot of daughters, it is their dad. And when a daughter feels seen by their dad and accepted by their dad, the confidence that they have is just it's through the roof. And and I say that because um and you might have experienced this in life where you are as a woman, you're coming up and you're in your own field, but you're a confident woman, but a lot of other people will judge you or critique you and saying, oh, men don't like when you do that, or men don't like overly confident women, right? Or women who just seem too independent and don't need anybody. When you have never said or done any of those things, it's just you have this confidence of like, hey, I was accepted a long time ago by my father, by my mother, by the people that love me, and I don't need acceptance from the world. So for me, it's just like I'm confident in who I am and what I do. And for others, it might be they're still looking for that. So that is what I see for my daughters. Is it's just wanting to be seen and just wanting to be accepted, but also
Right.
knowing as the parent, as the adult, when they're still young kids, is it's our responsibility to direct them. And so there are some things, unfortunately, that they're like, hey, look at me, accept me. It's like, hey, I love you. Part of that, okay, cool. But this part, no, we're not going to be doing that. That's not something that we do. And that's broken down to what you believe in morality and ethics within your own
Totally.
household. And
Totally.
so I think it's amazing, right? So like that is what it is for me, especially with two daughters. Is just giving them that attention, letting them know that they are seen, letting them know that they are loved. So when they do become young adolescents, young adults, and they're out in the world, that they don't need to be seeking attention from other people, uh,
Yes.
unless it's a partner and they want to and they want to get married one day when they're like
Right.
35. That's just me. Again, my
Yes.
rules. So,
Yeah,
uh,
for sure. I get it. I totally get it. I can only
uh,
imagine. I
uh,
have something's coming to me to share on that. Like, I really love that you, with such like two young girls under your care, your daughters are already like attuned to that. Because, um, my dad's amazing. I love him. But what was conditioned was more of like the other way of like the doing. So I was more seen or more validated for when I accomplished something or when I did something. But when I was in my being, it wasn't really acknowledged fully. And it was perfect because it shaped me in a lot of ways and it's allowed me to like move through like repatterning a lot of that. And the point I want to make with it is when we can kind of balance that out of it is really important not only to celebrate, especially for daughters, like their accomplishments and what they're doing. It is in the like who they're being and being able to see that. It's such a game changer. And not to say that we only want to lean into that, like their accomplishments and the things that they're doing also is part of them wanting to be seen and witnessed. But it's just like, yeah, I just really wanted to honor that you have already picked up on that and the impact that gets to make on how they perceive life is huge. Like it's huge.
yeah.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I think so. Like my biggest thing, and I'm not perfect at it by any means, but my biggest thing, when I notice from raising my daughters, and at one point my son is teaching them emotional intelligence, and it's one of those things that I don't think that I was properly taught, or taught to me, and so I had to figure out what that looks like as an adult. And when you do that as an adult, anybody can tell you, and you probably yourself, right? It's very difficult to do, right? When something that you should have learned when you were a young person to now you're an adult, where it's expected for you to already know these things, but you don't. So you're
Yeah.
having to learn it on the fly. And somebody who's already learned those things is just what seems like leaps and bounds ahead of you, and you're just like, man, it's just nothing phases them, or their life seems all well put together, and I'm just over here just in complete shambles. Like I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? And but for me, it's always been okay. I'm a dad now. I'm a husband, kids. I want them to know and learn emotional intelligence sooner rather than later. So when the world is very unforgiving, and I tell this to people all the time, especially the soldiers underneath me, in my care, I tell them all that the world is very unforgiving. And, for the longest time, we had our parents to protect us and take care of us and lean on them. And we did. But now, as adults, still that we have to kind of lean on ourselves more rather than lean on our parents. And our parents, while they would love for us to lean on them still, they also know in order for you to grow, in order for you to develop, in order for you to be that independent person that they want you to be and they need you to be, they have to instead of taking 2 steps back, it's now I have to take 10 steps back. And when you fall, I can't reach out my hand. I just have to watch and see what you do. And that's just kind of, one of those things where it's like, if we can prepare our children for as much as possible for those moments in their life that they're going to experience, they'll be better prepared rather than, unfortunately hitting that brick wall, falling, and then, crawling around in the dark trying to figure out where's the light at and who's going to help you, and you're just in this hole and you feel like you can never get out of it. So that is my biggest
Yeah.
thing. That is why I say what I say, because I just want my kids to know, like, hey, I love you and I'm here for you, and I'm going to here protect you and teach you all these things. But when you step out of this house, when you go into this world for the first time, because they're going to want to do it. As much as I want
Yes.
to sit here and say, hey, my daughter's going to get married till they're 35, they're going to want to experience the world as soon as possible. So when they go out, when they
Yeah.
want to do it and they figure out the world is unforgiving, it's just being able to say, like, hey, my dad taught me this. I know that the world is unforgiving. I know that people are not like me. They weren't maybe raised completely like me with the same beliefs, the same ideas. But however, I'm prepared for this rather than just, like I said, just kind of sitting there fumbling in the dark. So for you,
Totally.
being a mom, I imagine is one of those. It's a great accomplishment, right? And I say great accomplishment because at times I think we we devalue or overlook the responsibilities of being a mother is. And I say that as a father because as for me, I sit here and I can sit there and say, like, hey, I know what my responsibilities are. I know what in my mind the things that I'm thinking about, the responsibilities that I have, the burdens that I carry. I understand them, and I don't expect my wife to understand them in the sense of like what it is to carry them, but understand, like, hey, my husband, this is something he's aware, he's taken care of, and that's on him. We understand our roles more or less, if you will. So for you being a
Yep.
mother, and having, it is a burden within itself. Um, what are some of the things that you would say that husbands, even fathers, maybe don't realize or don't see that mothers are some of the things, the burdens that mothers are shouldering? And I'm not asking you to be a mother. What are some of those things that sometimes husbands and fathers don't recognize, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that emotional intelligence piece, just to like touch on it before I answer this question is like I was imagining of like you knowing like who's in your corner, like that's an internalized concept that gets built in the household during the young years so that then when you go out into the world, no matter what you're up against, like you know that in your corner you're backed up. And it's like not
Mm-hmm.
the physical presence of your mom and dad, but it's like the belief systems and the encouragement and the support that they've offered you that even if they're no longer on this planet anymore and they're on, like you still have that feeling of like my corner is protected, like I've got my back's covered, and no matter what I'm up against, it's going to be able to be overcome, whether it's being compassionate and like being able to understand somebody and being like, oh yeah, like I get you, even though you're totally different from me. Or if it's like a worthy adversary that's like, challenging you to become and stand in even more of what you say that you are by contrasting or opposing it, right? Like the challenge in the other way. And that's totally, it all comes down to also knowing then, right, when our parents have given us that safe place to be all of ourselves in our full range of emotion, like when we're frustrated, when we're raging, when we're sad, grieving, when we're totally joyful. If in our younger years, our parents are able to fully accept that without making any of it wrong, then one, we know like in our bodies, in our system, what it feels like to be with another person. Also, I've learned we are more likely to energetically attract those types of people in our lives who are more available for that. So life actually becomes more compassionate and can be more forgiving versus if in our younger years those were missing, what we will then more likely attract is people who don't necessarily hold the space for us. I think it's all things we can work on. Like we do certain work, like the work that I do is to help repattern those beliefs to then you get to like learn what it is like to be fully accepted in all of your full range of emotions so that then it's it's you know when it's okay to let the guard down. Like when you're around certain people, right? Like for example, I imagine you when you're out there, it's like you gotta have to put your shield up and you have to like do the thing. But when you know that you inside of you, you know that it is available for you because in your younger years that was available for you. When that type of person is around you, you can let that guard down. And that's so healing to then be able to like, if you need to like break something, break it out of rage. If you need to like cry, cry out of sadness and know that no part of that is going to be judged or made wrong or anything. And then from that point, you pick up and you keep going. It's like, it's done, it's gone. Like now I keep going. It's not like we don't dwell on it. We don't make ourselves judge ourselves for all of that. So I just wanted to touch on that piece for emotional intelligence is it becomes an internalized sense of being that we know we're supported by this like bigger force in ourselves that our mother and our father in our earlier years are the ones that get to instill in us through how they raise us.
Yeah.
Um, so going into like the question about as a mother, right? Like what are some of the burdens that we're carrying and how can fathers understand that better? I mean, for one, it's like our whole body is like being used for every ounce of energy that it has to grow another body. That's before the baby even comes out. Like everything we eat, that baby's eating like half of, I don't know, I mean, I'm making this up, right? Like they're eating a huge chunk of that energetically. So the amount that we need in terms of sustaining not only ourselves, but then sustaining that growing child within us, it literally takes every ounce of energy that we have, every thought we're having, every feeling we're feeling, everything that's in our field, that baby is also feeling because it's literally inside of us. And when it's birthed out, that doesn't stop because that's all that child has known is like that level of sustenance. And now it's out in the world where there's so much else happening. And all it's looking for is to like come back to that feeling of like, I'm surrounded in this like well of my mother's nurturing like home. And as you've probably witnessed, right? Like breastfeeding, all the things like the child cannot live without the mother that early on or that type of influence in its life
Mm.
where it's being nurtured and it's being given that energy on every level just to like continue growing itself in the way that it grows. One thing that I've learned that like Aaron and I have evolved in knowing, especially, I mean, I can speak to this because I have a son. So one day when I have a daughter, I'll be curious as to how this looks. Um, is that how a son relates to his father is directly correlated to how the mother is relating to the father. So if there is like a deep sense of understanding, if there is a bond, if there is a love there, it's like the father gets to bond with his son, not by directly bonding with his son. I mean, that's part of it by skin contact and all of that. But it's the energy that the father is supporting the mother with that the son is picking up on. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing it's probably very true for daughters as well, because when they're first born, that's kind of, they don't have language or anything. They're just feeling how safe does my mom feel right now? Like how much joy and peace and how much is she able to fully just relax in herself right now? That's all like the primary person that's going to be able to provide that for her is the father. And how our children relate to the fathers because it can sometimes be right like even dads be like, oh, I don't feel that connected, like I don't feel that connected to the baby doesn't settle down as much in my arms. Well, one, it's like don't worry about that. Like, just support the mom. If that disconnect with the baby is happening, just go into connecting with the mom. And in that relationship, the dad will get all that he needs to know about in terms of like what the child is feeling and how the child is understanding. The difference being the baby can't speak, baby can't talk, but whatever the mom's feeling, the baby's feeling. And so if the dad can understand what the mom's feeling, because she can communicate it, she can express it, then that will allow him to then understand how the baby's feeling and then be more available to support and sustain and nurture that baby in that way before the, like when they become 2 years old, 3 years old, then dads get more active with their kids because they can do more with them. But before that, there's like sometimes a disconnect where dads don't really know what to do or what their place is in the child's life, except providing, say, financially or in whatever other way that they can provide to keep the home, like to keep food on the table and to keep them feeling safe. But there's this like deeper level of intimacy that I'd say, call it, that's available in connection when dads can just feel like, how is the mom feeling right now? So I'm curious, as I'm saying this, like, what's your journey of that been like, and is this landing for you? Is there truth in it?
Yeah, there is. And it was so when my first daughter was born, she was born in 2018. I didn't really understand what my role was outside of being the provider within my home or whatever the case might be. So it was a learning experience sitting there thinking to myself like, okay, she's always with her mom because she's breastfeeding her because she relies on her mom for sustenance. She relies on her mom for that warmth, essentially, because her body is where she grew, and so she's used to. That's where she's most comfortable, and that in just a sense of
Right.
just being there time. And so for my first daughter, it took a lot. It took I won't say it took I will say it took a lot of time for me to accept like, okay, hey, my role for now is to be supportive, and that's to be supportive of my wife by any means, whatever the case might be, right? But also when the opportunity presents itself to be that nurturer, if you will, for my daughter, I will be there to do so. But also know it may not last as much as long as I want it to. It may not look like how I want it to look like. It's probably going to be different, and it was, and then it evolved to now where my daughters, they love, and it's amazing. So I come home when I come home from work, and I open the garage door and I come through my pantry door because it's kind of how my house is set up, right?
Mhm.
They are both there screaming, "Dad, Dad!" Super excited to see me, both giving me a hug. They want to tell me everything that they've experienced that day so far. And I'm just over here like, I really have to go to the bathroom. And I love you guys, but I just spent 45 minutes in traffic. I thought I was going to be home in 30, but that extra 15 minutes killed me, and I needed, I got to, hug him anyway. Try to say bye, but
I
like,
get it.
like it's still like it's one of those things where it's just learning. It's kind of like knowing what your role is, right? And one of the things I
Mhm.
related to is in sports, right? So I'll go with Michael Jordan since most people know who Michael Jordan is. Michael Jordan, he was the number one, right? But his number two, his sidekick, if you will, was Scottie Pippen, or if you superheroes, Batman and Robin, right? And at one point, everybody wants to be Michael Jordan. Both parents in their heads kind of want to be the Michael Jordan, but it's also understanding that, hey, it might switch, it might flip flop, right? The mom might be Michael Jordan and I might be Scottie Pippen, or she might be Batman and I'm Robin, or she's Robin and I'm Batman. It just flip flops, and just being able to accept that rather than saying like I have to be number one because I'm the dad and there's so much responsibility burden on the dad. And that just shows you're not thinking about, okay, but what is my wife thinking? How does she feel about this? What does that look like for her, right? And where does she think or believe like, hey, I fit in right here, or whatever the case might be? But that all comes through communication. Like, you have to be able to communicate with your significant other in order to understand these things, or you guys will both just kind of sit there and be floundering, thinking, coming up with these stories or these assumptions in your head, and then acting off of those assumptions that you made in your head, in your head, without ever having that conversation to say like, oh, I didn't understand that, I didn't know that, so I was just making it up in my head, believing myself, rather than just asking a simple question of like, hey, where do you see yourself in the dichotomy of this relationship at this moment, right? Our kids are 6 and 2, so how do you see yourself as the mother currently, or where do you see me as the father currently, and then do you think has that switch, where that evolved, where the case may be. So it's a communication thing. I'm huge on communication because I love to talk, because I love to speak. For me, it's just one of those things where it's like the best way to understand someone else is to talk to them, and to
Totally.
use words and to figure that out and figure out what that means, what that looks like. So we all have the same, hopefully come to a similar understanding, and to be able to move forward successfully. But
Love
that's what it
that.
looks like for me. I wanted to give you the opportunity. You did ask me a question before we press record here. And forgive me, I have ADHD, so my brain has forgotten what that question was. But
Yeah,
please go ahead and ask it.
for sure. Yeah, I was curious about you being a father of two girls and now expecting a little boy on the way. And I'm wondering, from like, what's that like for you to know now that you have a little boy coming? How would you compare that to the feeling of before your girls came into the picture? Like, as a dad, what's the difference and what's the similarities even between the expecting of a boy or girl?
Well, thank you for the question, because it's an amazing question, because I think it's a question that a lot of dads think about later on, meaning when they have two or even potentially three or four kids, how many kids people decide to have. But
Yeah.
um, it's a question that comes to our mind. So like as a man, as a young man when I was growing up, all I knew I wanted to be was a dad. And this is going to be a long about way of answering your question, but I promise I will
All
answer your
good.
question. I knew I always wanted to be a dad, and so when the opportunity finally arose, and I was becoming a dad, found out we were having our daughter. I was a little like, oh, it's a daughter, but like I was also excited because like, okay, hey, this is the plan that God has for me to have a daughter first. There's something that He's trying to show me, and I can tell you, it was patience,
Mm.
and so while I was happy and ecstatic to have daughters, I was like, man, as a man, I've always wanted to have a son. Like I don't know what it is for men. I don't know why, and I don't know if the same thing if it's for women. But like for men, it's like, hey, when I get married and I have kids, the first one's gonna be a son, and it's just gonna be amazing because me and my son, we're just gonna be doing all the things together, and it's I get to help raise this man to become a successful man, to surpass me even, and just do all these things, right? Um, but God works in mysterious ways, and He gave me two daughters. And, I love my two daughters more than anything. And I will say, in more directly answer your question, I'm nervous to have a son.
Mm.
I thought it would be, in my mind, I would be more prepared of like, hey, I'm finally having a son. This is going to be great. But I'm actually nervous because I've had two daughters. And so I know what to expect from there. I know kind of what that looks like. I know the emotional burden, if you will, that's required of me for having a daughter, but I don't know what it is that emotional burden is required of me to have a son. And so now, having a son, it's like super ecstatic, but at the same time, I'm like, am I going to do it right? Am I going to raise him to be the man that he needs to be? Because, I'm raising my daughters, and I'm like, sometimes I feel like I'm doing a great job, and other times I'm like, gosh, dang, I suck at this thing. And so it's like it's mixed feelings, but um, it feels and it looks different. And so
Mm.
now I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, I have this opportunity. The Lord's blessed me with this opportunity to raise the son that I've always wanted, and this is how deep it gets. It gets even deeper than that, right? So
Yep.
I wanted a son so bad that when I was 15 or 16, I picked out the name for my son. Didn't pick out the name for a daughter. Did not, but I had the name picked out for a son. And the name Elijah is from the prophet Elijah, when I read this, one of what really Elijah is known for in the Bible, which was praying and God bringing fire down from the heavens. When I read that for the first time when I was like 14, 15, and actually read it to understand it,
I got
I was
chills.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was amazing to me because I was like, that is what a man right there which is connected in trusting and having faith in God really looks like. To sit there and laugh at the prophets of Baal as they're doing what they're doing, right? And then to say, hey, we're gonna dump. I'm gonna dig a trench around my this big stick, all these sticks. I'm dig a deep trench, and then I'm gonna dump all of it with dump water on there. We're gonna do it 3 times, filling that trench up. And I think this Bible said the trench was like 6 feet deep, right? So like this was
Wow.
nothing to play with. To
Right.
then say like, all right, y'all go first, and he gave them their time. They're doing what they're doing, and then he's like, cool, got it, my turn. Say less, and he did it, and I'm just like, yo, it was
That's it.
amazing to me. And so for me, I was like, that is a strong name, and that I love that. So like at 16, internally in my head, I said, yep, my son's name is going to be Elijah James. When he
I
comes, it's
love
going to
it.
be Elijah James. And so that is it. That is how powerful it was for me to meaning for have a son. But I had 2 daughters. So when my second daughter, when we did the gender reveal for my second daughter, there's a video and there's a photo, and the people that were there, they can tell you my oldest daughter actually makes fun of me to this day for this. But we popped the balloon, and the pink confetti comes down, and all like just dad's really initial reaction in the moment was just a
Yeah.
moment of just like,
Just imagine.
you know, I wasn't disappointed. I was just upset because I was like, oh, I just thought it was gonna be a son this time.
Totally.
I thought it was for real. But now, we finding out it's gonna be a son, I'm excited. I get to do all those things. But also for me, my firstborn, my daughter, she's the spitting image in my identical twin. Like everything about her is me, right? And
Mm.
so while I'm so grateful to have a son, I'm also like, I just love my daughters and being blessed with 2 daughters, because I didn't know at the time that it was going to be amazing to be a girl dad. I just thought it
Right.
was like, man, all those girl dads are just,
Yeah.
my life must be a little hard for them. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
amazing, especially when they're young. But as they get older, and then the 15-year-old comes out of them, and they're the attitude, and you're like, I wanted this. This is what I wanted. I was ready for this. I'm
Exactly.
prepared. So, but that is
Yeah.
what it is for me.
This was what was meant to be.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
it.
And it's
I have
so
a
it's
follow
amazing.
up question to that if you're okay with it.
Absolutely,
I
go
have a
for it.
follow up question because I heard you say that you were adopted. And so I'm
Yes.
curious, like how is that, like, what kind of impact is that making on like, fatherhood in general for you? And then maybe even more so now expecting your son to come into the picture.
Well, so yeah, awesome question. So, I it's the whole reason for this, right? Like, me being adopted, mediocre dads would not be a thing because if I wasn't adopted, and
Mm.
I mean that wholeheartedly. And to kind of give some background, um, I have a twin brother. We're identical twins, and we were adopted when we were 2 years old by a white family.
Okay.
And I say that not to be derogatory to them, but it's an essential part of the story because it's an essential part of my character and growing up and who I
Yeah.
am today. But we were adopted, and we grew up. We were growing up, and for me, I won't speak for my brother, but for me, there were so many times in my life, like I would remember when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, uh, as Christmas was coming up, right? So, for example, my birthday is November 12th, and then obviously you have Thanksgiving, and then you have Christmas. So a heavy holidays season towards the end of the year, especially having a birthday and then going into that, right? So like I would in my mind, I was like, okay, all right, well, I'm adopted, I understand that, but maybe, just maybe, our birth parents will show up, and they'll come kicking down the door, and they'll be like, hey, we're your parents, come pick you up, and we're gonna, everything's gonna be happy and hunky
Right.
dory, and we're We're going to go off into the sunset, right? Like that's kind of what I
Yep.
envisioned. Like my Christmas present was going to be that. And
Right.
it never happened. And it was a defeating feeling knowing, sitting there thinking like, gosh, dang, like why these people who gave birth to us, right? They don't, it's like they don't care. And they got rid of us and they never wanted to speak to us again. And it wasn't until I was 16 that our birth mom reached out to us or reached out to my mom. And then she was like, hey, on Facebook, and she was like, hey, can I want to talk to him? We became friends on Facebook, started talking, having a conversation, spoke to her,
Mm.
asked all the questions, got the story, if you will, because I wanted to know, as well as
Yep.
my brother. And
Of
then
course.
she said, hey, well, this is who your birth dad is. And, we friends on Facebook. I let him know I reached out to you guys and you guys can become friends. And you guys can, ask questions and talk and figure out kind of what that relationship will look like for you. We became friends on Facebook and he never spoke to me. He didn't say a single thing to me. Never. He would post all the time, but there was never a message of saying, hey, this is who I am. Do you have any questions? Let me know. I can answer them the best of my ability. He never said anything, nothing, not a single word. Right. And to this
Mm.
day, I've never spoken to that man. And
Okay.
that hurt me because it was like, this is the guy that, I was supposed to, I'm supposed to look like, I'm supposed to be like, and he wants nothing to do with it basically seems like he doesn't want anything to do with me. It was just for him. It was, he was young and dumb, made a mistake, and these are the consequences. It is what it is. You just got to live with it. And you're off doing what you're doing. And it was
Right.
like, hey, no, I have questions. I'm a young man who has questions, and I want to know, and I want some of your guidance, your wisdom that you've gained over these years to help me become a better man, not just become friends on Facebook just for the sake of saying like, yep, those are my two sons that I had when I was 15. Yippee
Right.
me, right? Like, and it never happened. So for me, all of that became, it was okay, mediocre. It was one of those things was like, I'm going to be a dad one day, and I'm going to be a better dad than he is. And I'm going to prove to myself that I can be a dad regardless of the situation in which I was brought, that brought me into this world. And so that transformed over time, especially after joining the military, to when I did become a dad, and then wanting to create something, aka that came out of it, was Mediocre Dads. And so like being
Um.
adopted for me in my whole life, and I think I said this beginning, like was that's where Mediocre Dads came from. It pulled from that. But at the time, it was, for me, it was this like, hey, I never want anybody to go through this. This is a miserable experience. But also I
Yeah.
learned, and I'll surmise with this. What I learned was I was looking for that fatherly leadership, mentorship, if you will, that wisdom that dads give their kids from a person that was never going to give it to me. And subconsciously, I was learning from my adopted dad, who I call my dad to this day, from him all along. And so now, anytime me and him are together, and we're talking, we're doing whatever, and other people are around, they're like, you guys are you guys are the same. It's like I'm looking at the same person here, but you guys are different.
Love
He's
it.
white, you're black, and like, I don't know what it is, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's my dad. And they're like, oh what? Yeah, well, that's my dad. That's why we're the same or we're different, because he's my dad. And so
I
it's
love
just
it.
amazing, because that development that came from literally just finally being able to realize and accept who I was as a person, and accept that
Mm.
that person that I wanted to get it from was never going to give it to me, but the guy who adopted me, who was wanted to give it to me, he's been here the entire time, and I just needed to
Oh,
recognize that. So that is where that all
felt
that
that.
came from, and I hope I answered that question.
Beautiful. Yeah, it was just really lovely to hear you speak. Like I had this curiosity about this aspect of you and where even the name of this podcast is so interesting, right? Like mediocre dads. Like
Mm-hmm.
where did and that wasn't even what I was like going with to ask about, but that question got answered as well. So just thank you. And I want to say, what you had answered about your perspective on having being a girl dad and a boy dad and how you were imagining fatherhood. When you get a chance to have the conversation with my husband, Aaron, I think you guys are really going to jam on that because he too, very similar, like that very kind of like, yep, like I'm gonna have a son and like gonna be the thing. So I think in the dialogue with him of him actually living into that reality and what he's learning and how it's actually going could, yeah, I think it'd be really lovely for you to like tap into that conversation with him from like a man to man, father to father point of view.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to him. Truthfully, I was excited to talk to both of you. And so when he reached out, or I guess I don't know if it was him or you, but both of you essentially reached out, right?
Yeah.
And I read the post, and it took me a few days because I sat there and I was like, man, I was like, I really want to talk to them individually, and then I want to talk to them together. But then it was outlined, and they're like, hey, we can do it. We've done that before, and I was like, oh man, that's so awesome. Because now,
Yay.
like, to get it individually and then coming together, like it's amazing. Because then you go two perspectives and you bring them together, and then to see
Totally.
truthfully, in my next career path, right, I want to be a counselor. And I'm really interested in marriage and
Mm,
family. Not saying you guys need counseling, but how I look at it from there is I sit there and to see when you ask a couple of questions, especially when they're together, and you can see the moment where they either look at each other or there's a side eye, there's a
you can feel it.
yeah, saying
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
see the nature, the true nature of just like them coming out, and also the genuine love they have for each other. Especially it's a question where you're just like, how did you know she was the one? Where it's just like, and you're just like, oh yeah, I know where this answer is going. You know what I mean? It's an amazing thing to see. And,
Yes.
and so like I
Yes.
enjoy those things. I enjoyed it, especially seeing happily married couples. And not every moment is happy. I get it. I'm married. I've been married for over 10 years, so I totally understand. But ultimately, at the
Yeah.
core, it is happiness. So, my
Yeah.
final question for you before we come to a close here is, ultimately, my intent with here with this, and we did meet my intent, totally wholeheartedly, we did meet my intent. But my final question is, from your perspective, what do you think the best way a father impacts their children's lives, right? And that could be from your personal experience, where from your father to you, or for how you see your husband Aaron impacting your son's life. But I think it's important, especially for dads who are listening, and even for moms who are listening, to get a perspective that they haven't gotten before of, okay, this is what I think is important as far as how the role that men play in express when they're raising their kids. Because I get it
Mm,
from men all the time, right? I have my perspective. I get it from men all the time, but to get it from you, it would be an amazing to hear what you think.
yeah. It's such a beautiful question because there's so many answers. But actually, I'll share with an experience I just recently had, which took me pleasantly by surprise. It was a day where I was just like a lot was moving through me. When I say that, like I was very emotional. It was like full moon. I was on that like my cycle of that time period. There was just a lot going on in my life. And I have now, through the work that I've done with myself, like I'm at a place where I'm comfortable with my emotional expression. And for little kids, I think that's where they naturally are. One, so what happened was in that moment, right, there was a part of me that used to exist when I was a kid that thought like this wasn't okay. Like all I needed to do was cry and like the tears were like welling up. And there was no part of me anymore that holds that back. Like I've healed that part of me. And when this was happening was my dad was sitting across the room on the couch. There was like the coffee table in between us. My 2-year-old son was like playing and building with his blocks in between us. And my dad's very receptive. Like he's very one who likes to communicate and be in connection. And so in that moment, I had nothing to give him except just like I was just in my feelings and the tears just started to come through and just like, and it was just, there was no words. I was just feeling. And my dad in that moment just I guess maybe I can't speak for him what he was going through for him. He didn't say anything, but what he did is he pulled up his phone and I guess he went to my Instagram page and he started to like watch videos of me when I on some of my shares on Instagram. And one of the shares again was this like did he know what he was doing or was it just like divine guidance in the moment? The share that he went on that I just heard coming up from his phone was my own voice talking about some wins in my life recently, things that I was celebrating that have gone really well for me. And I was just hearing my own voice saying that while I was still very much in my feelings. And in that moment, like something just I felt so supported, even when my dad maybe didn't know how to support me. All he did was like go in with curiosity. This is what I made up the story to be, is that he just got curious and wanted to know more about me, and maybe thought like, I can't talk to her right now because she's emotional and I don't know what to say to her emotions, but like I want to hear from her. So why don't I go on her Instagram and hear from her, like what's going on in her life? And ended up hearing that. And in hearing me through that part of myself, when I was speaking from a more like, I was feeling lit up and more like not that I wasn't happy when the emotions were coming, because I don't think the emotions mean I was as like I'm a sad person. It was just stuff was moving through me. Like I needed to clear some feelings out, but that I was in a state of more like celebration and wins and that. So all this to say, like, I hope that in itself answers one way. But what I got from it is when our children are at like a point where they don't feel like they're fully in their light, like say they're in one of their darker times, whatever that may be, when we can hear that inner voice within them, that empowerment inside of them that actually does feel good enough and does feel great, and can bring that voice out of them by whatever means there are at the time. For me in that moment, and this happened like 2 weeks ago, where it was just hearing my own voice on my Instagram that my dad was then just, and then he went to another video, another video, and by that point, I was like, wow, like he's just hearing me right now and wanting to hear something from me that's greater than or even beyond what I'm showing him in just raw emotion at this moment. And so like really getting into your kid's corner and helping them bring out that voice within them that maybe in any moment they're not hearing for themselves. And if they don't have a voice in that space, offering them that voice and affirming things for them that maybe at that moment, perhaps someone has said something to them that was deep, like, that was dimming their light. And if we can then bring more light into that part of them and like speak to the light inside of them, that can be like the biggest game changer. And it comes from one, not feeling like we need to back away, but in even like backing away or say giving space, we're actually really like wanting with curiosity to get into what's going on, like where are they coming from, what is here. And I really believe you saying that counseling is your next career. It makes sense because a counselor really, like the way I see it, has enough of a capacity and curiosity to want to continue conversation and communication with people even in their darkest times, and not feel like that's not worth having a conversation with. Like you're
Yeah.
still wanting to get in to understand. And I would imagine it comes from the story you shared of your upbringing, of like your connection with your dad. It's like you still want to know, even if it's not there and available for you, you still want to know like what's underneath it. And I think if we as parents, as dads, for daughters or sons, or just in general as parents, can bring that to the table, that can make such a big difference in this world today, when women especially are being raised in a world that has been built more by men for men, not out of like hate for women, but it's just built a certain way. And I think as a woman, when she can feel at a young age met in her confusion of life, like this just doesn't make sense to me. Like, how do I live in this, being what I am and seeing what I see? As a dad who can come in and like help her make sense of it by saying like, it's okay, like, I get where you're coming from, and like this is how it is, and maybe you can help me see what you're going through, so that then I can frame how I create life around you to be more in touch with what you're feeling on the inside. We can find a balance in all of it, and neither of us feels like there's no understanding in it. So that would be my answer to your question on how
That's
to do that.
awesome. I in particular, I like your way on how you related it with your experience with your dad, or the moment with your dad. And it's funny because sometimes it, and I won't speak for your dad, but just imagining being myself in that moment, he maybe realized what he was doing, but also at the same time, he didn't maybe not realize how much of a moment it was for you, as much it was just like, hey, she seems upset right now. I don't really know what to say. So like, I'm just gonna maybe if I do this, and just hopefully it will simmer down the crying, whatever the case might be, right? But it still was a moment for you where it's like, hey, I had a moment with my dad where your dad was like, yeah, I remember that. You were just crying, and I was just like, oh, this is a lot. It's, I didn't know I didn't know what to say, so I just, yeah. But I say that because it's amazing. Like if for anybody who really puts themselves out there and decides to use social media as a platform to put themselves out there in a way, especially as you are, and in the way as I am through my podcast, whatever the case might be, it's amazing what happens because we don't we never realized that our parents at one point will probably watch some of our stuff, right? Some of the things that we put out there, but not really saying like this is for my parents, right? And so when you realize like they are watching or listening, you're like, holy crap, my parents are like like they're supporting me outside of just saying like, hey, I liked your post or something. They're actually like listening and seeing what my mannerisms, or listening to what I'm saying in this, and then they're like, oh wow, being receptive to it. It's amazing just to be like, that's a whole new feeling of empowerment, as you say, and confidence, and a whole new level where you're like, no, I do feel seen. I do feel like
Yeah.
I'm meeting my calling, or in following my purpose in life, not just like sitting there, just your parents just be like, yeah, I mean, that was all right, I guess, whatever, moving on, and no big deal. But like actually just sit there and have them listen to you, like, gosh, this is amazing. It's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing experience. But,
Yeah.
hey, Harsha, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a wonderful experience to have you on here. I am looking forward to having both you and Aaron here on the same time. But also I'm looking forward to having your husband on here as well. So please, please, please let him know that I am looking forward to having him on and having a conversation with him, getting his perspective on a few different things, especially some of the things that we spoke about, but also kind of going deeper into some of the other things as fathers and as men. So I really look forward to it. But also, thank you so much again for coming on. Thank you for being a guest on the show. Guys, hey, all of her stuff, all of her social media and everything will be in the description below. I highly encourage y'all, please, please, please check out her Instagram. Follow her on Instagram. I'm telling you guys, like, she has a lot of stuff on her Instagram. I was going through it today, and I was looking at it previously, but I was really going through it this morning. I was kind of like, oh man, this is pretty cool. Oh wow, I didn't know that. Okay, man, and just finding out new things and learning, and so it's really awesome, guys. Really check out her Instagram and follow, give her a follow, of course. And then
Appreciate
to
that.
conclude all of it up, guys. Hey, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the Mediocre Dads channel. It does us a great service if you do that. We're trying to get to ultimately well over 1,000 subscribers, but checkpoints, right? So let's get to 500 first. But please, please, please subscribe to the channel, of course, and follow us on Instagram. And I will say this, as I always do in my conclusions: being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. That's all I got for you guys. Mediocre Dads out.